Okay. So, just from a family background, you were born in what town?
Weston, Lewis County, Weston, West Virginia.
Okay, 1917. And your
My,
parents' occupations?
my father was a bridge builder. Uh, he helped build bridges, railroad bridges.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he died when I was 5 in 1922, I think.
And how many siblings did you have?
We had eight. I had 8 brothers and 2 sisters.
Wow. And you're
That's,
the baby? Or?
I'm the youngest of all.
Okay.
The only one left.
Wow, okay. And you mentioned other relatives who'd been in the military.
I had 2 other brothers, a year or two older than I. We were all in the European theater. I had 2 brothers that was in World War One.
Okay.
Because being a large family.
Now, did they re-enlist?
No.
Were they involved in the
They
war?
didn't never. They never got overseas either.
Okay.
My one brother was a very prominent man in Washington D.C. He owned a garage on Pennsylvania Avenue, and he took care of all the congressmen's and senators' cars. Did very well, and he later became a farmer, a gentleman farmer, and he was voted the best tobacco grower in Maryland after 2 years.
Oh, wow.
So, but he was, everything he did turn to money.
Interesting.
That was Henry. That was the number 2 boy.
Okay.
Bob was the number 1 boy. He was in natural gas in the town of Weston, so.
But in terms of your military service, if I'm not mistaken, you were already working for the Department of Defense. How did you end up working for the Department of Defense?
Well, to further my education, I took a civil service exam and went to work for the Secretary of the Army in 1940.
Okay.
So I worked in 40, went into the service, come back, and from there I went to CIA.
So when you were working for the Department of the Army, that was before the Pentagon. Where were they?
No. Actually, that was before the Pentagon. I was on Independence Avenue in the buildings that were built in World War One as temporary, but they were still going. We moved from there to Security and Exchange Building on Pennsylvania Avenue. Now this is Secretary of the War.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there we moved into the Pentagon. Okay. So I was in the Pentagon.
So you were one of the first. You actually were one of the first people who worked in the Pentagon.
I was in there before it was ever really finished.
Okay. What exactly did you do when you said you were working for the Department for the Secretary of the Army?
Well, actually, I was again in the accounting field.
Okay.
And that's how I became involved in CIA, if you will.
Okay. So was that on-the-job training, or did you have any background in that before you?
Well, I went to school.
Okay.
And when OSS broke up, they split the units between state and the Army.
Okay.
My job was actually making sure they had all the money they wanted.
And this is after the war, you mean?
SSU,
Yeah, okay.
Strategic Services Unit.
Okay.
That was the unit that came to us. I don't know what the unit was that went to your dad's place.
Okay. State Department.
But,
okay. And so how did you end up going from a civilian position to being actually enlisting in the Army? Were you, did your number come up, or were you?
No, I just told him, man, I got so tired of politics that I just went down and told him to pick me up. My boss actually says, Linda, you don't have to go. You were in the Secretary of the Army's immediate office. You don't have to go. And I said, no, I'm sorry. I just got so tired of politics that, because December the 7th, 1941,
Mm-hmm.
come along. Now, out there it's dark. It's just like night and day. Next day, everybody was in uniform. Everybody.
Now, so you're in D.C. Where were you living at the time when you heard about Pearl Harbor, or how did that happen?
Well, I think I had an apartment in Washington, D.C.
And do you remember the moment when you found out the country was at war?
No. I heard it through the radio or what
Sure.
have you, so.
And so when did you actually make the move when you enlisted?
Well, I'd have been with them, so 42, 43, 43, yeah. So I went into, and I had 2.5 years in the military, and I came back, and 47, and 40, part of 48, because I went with the agency in July of 48.
Okay, but when you joined, when you actually went off to, I guess, basic training and whatnot, that was in what year was that?
40, early 43.
And did you give any thought to any other service?
No.
As an Army man all the way. And did you, when you at that time, I guess, when you joined, was it kind of did you have any choice of where you were going to go or where they would put you?
No. No, actually, we left Fort Lee, Virginia, which is down next to Richmond, and we boarded a train, which was completely blacked out. We didn't know whether we were going north, south, east, or west. Didn't know. And we finally, after a couple of days, we wound up in New Orleans. They let us out, and the populace there treated us royally. And what have you. Next day, we boarded the train, blacked out, still didn't know where we were going, and we wound up in El Paso, Texas.
Okay, and so
we had a lot of people from New York and from Pennsylvania, and they looked around and the first exclamation was, "This must be hell," because of cactus sand and what have you. So
now, in terms of you're like in your mid-20s then. Are most of the other people you're in with, are they
were young people?
Mostly young?
Oh yeah, I have pictures of our whole group here. But anyway, we had 155 men, including officers.
And so at that point, when do you find out what unit you're going to be in, or?
Well, we found out when we arrived in Texas what it was. It was air. Oh boy, U.S. Army anti-aircraft.
Okay.
Anti-aircraft, yeah.
And was that what was that like what division or?
No, it was just a unit of this group of, and in this, well, let me go back up. The first unit, I transferred out of the first unit when they sent me back to school in Aberdeen, Maryland.
Huh.
And then I went back and rejoined another unit. I never worked on the cannons, but I worked on the machines that directed the cannons.
Okay, so are you talking about the anti-aircraft?
Huh?
Anti-aircraft?
Yeah. Yeah, I worked on the machine. And our group there we had men in here, jewelers that we could work on wristwatches up to like tanks. Anything. From wristwatches to, so we had to drive all of the different vehicles.
What do you mean by that? From wristwatches up to?
Well, we had people in our unit.
That had mechanical experience?